he's simply not as engaged in it as he is in other things because the Americans have decided in the era of hemispheres they simply don't care enough.
Now we can hear from Tim Marshall, the Foreign Affairs analyst, the author of Prisoners of Geography. Hello to you, Tim.
Hello there, John.
Hi. So what's stuck in your mind?
A number of things. One, nearly every grown-up analyst said he's got no intention of invading Greenland. He simply didn't. But it was the master of reality TV got us all watching the show. And I do agree with you and Katie that these are opening gambits, which he will return to. And the crisis, which is still what it is, hasn't gone away because he didn't say the tariffs were now off, which means that once we get to, I think it's February the 6th, is it? If he hasn't opened full negotiations, then the US tariffs could come in which case then the European Union tariffs and maybe even the British tariffs kick in. And so there is that really serious economic element to it. Other big things, I mean, there's no question about the headline. Of course, I'm not going to use force. Other big things, though, shot through the whole 1.5 hour ramble was the thing that we've talked about a lot, this era of hemispheres. You know, I've always argued we've moved out of the post-Cold War era and we're into a new era. And today I was just thinking, from what he was saying, this is the era of hemispheres. Another thing he mentioned was Golden Dome. This is the missile defense system that he wants to put over Greenland. The last thing I'd say is the thing that he didn't mention. There was one very, very brief aside when he mentioned the word Iran, because I believe the Iran story is going to come back before the end of this month.
Yes.
So those are, for me, the sort of the big lines.
Right. I mean, I should say that I'm not entirely a proponent of the idea that Donald Trump aims for the stars with the intention of taking home the moon. He does give a very good impression, Tim, of being erratic and even irrational some of the time.
Yeah, the madman theory. It's great. Look how crazy I am. Look what I might do.
Yeah.
And then,
but I'm not completely sure I'm not sure that's entirely an act.
10, you win. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that's entirely a bit of artifice. I think he's certainly sometimes as erratic and irrational as he seems.
Got hostile takeovers. That's how he made his career. With hyperbole. Actually, he calls it constructive hyperbole, where he just sort of goes in and thumps the table and gets everybody scared. But like I said, if you open with I want 100% and you end up getting 10%, you're still 10% further on than you were. But, you know, we're not out of the economic problem here, which really, you know, is about people's jobs and the cost of living crisis when it comes down to it. So, you know, let's not forget that. But also, and I'm sorry to keep banging on about Iran, but I do think that's coming up the agenda.
No, it's a point well taken. But I know there's not going to be any going back to anything like what we used to call normal here, is there? Because out of all of this, there has been a massive rupture just in the fabric of trust between NATO allies, and that's just not going to be repaired.
No, it's not because of this new time. In the new time, which is an era of hemispheres, and the Americans concentrating on what they regard as their hemisphere, and they include Greenland in it. But there's something else that's happening in this new era, is that nation states, most of them, if not all of them, and this was shot through with Mark Carney's speech at Davos yesterday, the Canadian Prime Minister, is that increasingly now in the new era, governments look at trade through the lens of national security. So just as Trump is looking at Greenland, which is partly a trade issue, but he's using the sanctions and economics and trade to win the national security argument to try, so actually all countries are. And if you are going to start having to look at trade through national security and securing your supply lines and securing your metals, which was mostly, I think, what Venezuela was all about, as well as the oil, then that old era of win-win and of big alliances with shared values, that is what is rapidly fraying. And you will be left with the old things that the Romans knew, which is that alliances are best made when we don't really like each other, but we're more frightened of them. So
Yeah.
we'll stick together. It's not a pretty world, but it is the one that we are accelerating into.
And meanwhile, term Ukraine, which is the real big issue facing Europe and the strategic power balance, Ukraine and the war has been sidelined, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Does it amount to a material, really, in that sense, significant setback for the cause of Ukraine, or is this just another one of those many, many obstacles that have had to be overcome?
I think it's the latter, but it also fits into what we were just talking about. That he's simply not as engaged in it as he is in other things because the Americans have decided in the era of hemispheres they simply don't care enough. And I was struck when he brought it up when he really did seem sort of exasperated. And he did actually lay the blame on both presidents, Zelensky and Putin, saying, I make them a great deal. And he says, no, I don't want it. Then I make him a great deal. And he says, he doesn't want it. And there really was an air about him of, I can't be bothered with this. Now, there's many a slip and cup on the story. There's a lot still to go. But yeah, he's losing interest. He has other fish to fry.
That is another tragedy. Tim Marshall, thank you so much.